And we are recording, so we'll start over again.
No, it's okay. All right, so hi everyone, I'm Emily. I met some of you at a meeting, I was on Zoom in December, right? And there I did have some slides, and I'm happy to share slides if people want to see pictures, but Abby said it was fine to keep this informal, and so I don't have slides. I was just gonna talk through some things and mostly wanted to discuss stuff. But basically my lab, we work on human environments and how organisms deal with human environments and which species do particularly well and which ones don't, and trying to understand why. And at the moment, we're doing a lot with pollutants and thinking about how, especially in urban ecosystems, how pollutants move through urban ecosystems, the role that humans play in that, how they affect the life there, but then how the activity of the life there feeds back and makes the pollutants less of a big deal. And mostly that's because in a lot of cases, you might have pollutants in the soil or in the water, but they might not actually be moving into the organisms in using that space, so they're not bioavailable. So we have a number of studies where we're looking across an urban gradient of heavy metal pollution, but we're also starting to work on microplastics. I think this project is more relevant to the heavy metal pollution, but we're doing a lot of stuff, especially looking at pollinators and how metals move from the human inputs into the soil, into the plants used by the pollinators, and then into the pollinators, and which pollinators are more susceptible to the heavy metal pollution and which ones are completely fine, because it turns out that some, for example, in butterflies, monarchs are very sensitive to heavy metal pollution, but cabbage whites actually do a little bit better. If you give them some lead, they do a little bit better. So there's quite a lot of variation in sensitivity to pollutants. So in our urban work, we just started as part of an urban ecology project 2 years ago. Actually really started last summer. And so we're at the moment kind of acquiring a lot of new field sites, and we're very interested in places where there are pollinator plantings going in, because that offers a really interesting long-term opportunity to look at how the pollinator planting affects the pollutants in the soil. And so that's kind of how we got hooked up with you guys with Jessica on the Jameson Front property. And I have looked through some of the MPCA documents for that property. There's some heavy metal pollution there, especially chromium, but a couple others as well. And from a research perspective, it's really interesting to us because you guys are putting in a pollinator planting to potentially take samples before that pollinator planting goes in and then monitor it over time to see how any pollutants that are in that soil change, and we're really interested in how they change in their bioavailability. So what we're predicting is that, so for example, as the organic matter of the soil goes up, often the bioavailability of metals goes down. But depending on the metal, other things change as well. So as the soil becomes more acidic, usually the bioavailability goes up. So if you have a lot of lead in your yard, you don't want to plant a bog there, for example. You want to keep it more basic. So just having a pollinator planting and not removing the vegetation and increasing the organic matter in the soil over time should help remediate the soil in theory. But there are also some other things that we're exploring in some of our other sites, for instance, applying biochar. We're going to try doing some of that this summer. And so if that's of interest, we could, make some subplots in the Jameson Front plot and like put a little bit of biochar in like a square foot area here, here, and here, and here. And then over time come back and sample the soil. And then you can also, so you can sample the soil and measure the chemistry of the metals in the soil, but you can also sample the plants and ask, given the metal in the soil, is the metal going into the plants? It's easiest to do that with the leaves, but we've also done it with pollen and nectar. So anyway, that's kind of the overview, and I'm particularly interested in hearing what you guys are interested in from a research perspective on this site. And I haven't had an update in terms of the site plan in a little while either, in terms of when the planting, I think the planting would start this summer, and so yeah, we would love to hear more.
Would you like an update on?
I would love an update, yeah.
And Jessica?
Yeah, no, that's perfect segue because I literally checked my email right before this meeting and got noticed that we got the Capital Region grant that we applied for. So that's really exciting. So that's a little update. So that allows us to expand what we're wanting to do a little bit. But as of right now, let's see, where are we at? So Ramsey County has, like, we have a signed contract with them saying that we can actually use that site, but they will still take care of it, all of those kind of things, take care of the mowing of it and all of those things. We are working with Metro Blooms to get a contract going. We are waiting to hear about this funding, but we aren't planning on planting until September. That is an update. Metro Blooms wanted to do a fall planting just so that we didn't have to do what we did at Orchard, which was like water all the time, all summer. And so doing a fall should probably cut down on that. So we are planning to do a community planting in September. We still need a date on that one.
Okay.
I'm trying to think of any other updates on the Jameson front. I think that's kind of it. We are going to do a community outreach piece at our May event at the pickup and party event.
Okay.
So that's an update from the admin perspective.
Well, it's helpful from our end as well, because if we were planting this summer, I think as in our email, we would need to sample soil pretty soon. And if we could sample soil over the summer, it would relax things a little bit, because it could be part of our soil sampling summer team, which is actually going to be much more detailed soil sampling. And we could possibly, if you guys wanted to turn it into a community event, do that. It's going to be a series of, like, we're going to do, because we're also studying worm activity, because worm activities should be interacting with the leaf litter over time. And so our soil sampling will probably, at a lot of these sites, well, the site is small, so it would probably be a half a day thing, but we'll have 50 centimeter cores in like probably 4 or 5 locations. And then if it's possible to do a meter core, I can't remember how deep that cap is, but we don't want to hit the cap, so we could not go all the way to the cap. But
I don't remember. I'm thinking in my head it was 5 feet, but Dawn or Julianne might know.
Okay.
A little bit. I can't remember.
Okay. But the soil sciences lab that we're working with has this cool equipment that does less accurate, but still fairly accurate live readings of the metal. So like you can take a core, we could do a core, and then like the plan is we'll do 2 centimeter readings up to a meter. And then we'll take 10 to 20 centimeter bits of that and actually send it to a lab. But that way, if people were interested in seeing it, like, we'd get data right there.
Yeah, we have quite a few community members who live like right in that area who have been very interested in what will be found, and have been in that area since they did the cleanup. So I think that would be very interesting to a lot of our community.
Yeah. I don't know if we'll probably need to run that by NPCA or whoever, Ramsey County or whatever.
To do the sampling?
To do the sampling.
And that's what you said will take about a day?
Half a day. The meter cores take like an hour to shove into the ground.
And you said you wanted to maybe make it a community?
If people want to, they could, like, if there's interest. It doesn't need to be a community event, but if there are people there who want to see it work and want to see what the dirt looks like and stuff.
Okay, so it's an observation.
Like an observation, yeah.
And that would be having to come up pretty soon, you said?
No, if we have this flexibility, it would probably be in July, sometime over the summer. Because I don't think we would be able to do that until June at the earliest.
Jessica, what do you think about having, well, we could just promote it in our newsletter as a come and watch if you want.
Yeah.
And then Jessica.
Yeah, and yeah, I was gonna say the same thing. Like I think it would be something that people might be interested in. I know, like, we have just like a Lons to Legume list of people that have shown up who I'm assuming there's on the newsletter, but we could send it out to them too. I think that would be good. I guess that one of the questions I had was, can we, because I know Metro Blooms kind of wants a soil sampling before we like sign a contract with them, which we'd like to do a little bit earlier if possible. And
Yeah,
so
we
is there a
can
way
do
to do just like a little sample?
Yes.
I'm not.
Yeah, we can do a little sample. I mean, that is easy. Like we can just run in there with a soil core and take probably the top 10 centimeters.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. Are there any things they're particularly interested in for that, or they just want to know?
They're mostly thinking from a their gardeners' health and also our community health point of view. Like, is it safe? I mean, we just got readings. What was that, like 3 years ago? And everyone seems okay with that. So I don't think there should be any surprises, but they were just wanting to make sure that it would be like safe for their workers to be digging in the soil and doing stuff in the soil. And then also we're doing a community planting. And so I think they just wanted to make sure, since it is a cleaned up site.
I did, at one of our group meetings, I did talk to some of the chemists who are on our research about hexavalent chromium, and like PPE for working with that if it's in the soil. And they seemed, if I remember correctly, they seemed to think it was only a danger if you were gonna be drinking or eating the soil, less in terms of, so like they were not that worried about it. Yeah.
Would it benefit you and your lab to do this? The soil sampling?
It would fit within, so we're basically building like a spatial map of metal pollution across the Twin Cities. And so it would definitely fit within that for a lot of the metals that we're mostly studying: lead, copper, zinc, and a little bit in terms of arsenic and nickel. But so it certainly fits within that as a study site. From a research perspective, it's interesting because nobody seems to be working that much on chromium in terms of sort of ecosystem questions about chromium. So yeah, I would say it's interesting to us as well from a research perspective. And we have several grants that are kind of funding sampling broadly across the Twin Cities, so it would fit within that. So we would pay for all the sample processing.
So it's free?
Yeah, it's free to you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That changes my attitude.
Yeah, no, we're not gonna bill you for anything. It's just, I mean, this is particularly exciting because, you know, you're already planning the pollinator plantings and we have a time zero, and you guys presumably would be doing the planting and the maintenance and all that stuff. And so from a research perspective on our end, we come in and sample every year or two, and that's cool and great. And it's like a perfect partnership in my mind, but yeah. What other amendments might be available besides biochar? That's a great question. So it depends a little bit on the soil chemistry, and we're working with someone in Earth Sciences who is going to be doing more detailed soil chemistry. But so for example, you can add like, and I will preface this by saying I'm not a soil scientist, so this is mostly what I've learned. But depending on the chemistry of the soil, you can add lime to change the pH. You can add, there are certain phosphate salts that will bind some metals. You can add compost at some sites, but it depends. You can add certain clay aggregates that will react with it, but it depends on what the starting chemistry is as to what is sort of the best to add. One of the reasons why we're exploring biochar is some garden sites. They're actually making a lot of like wood waste, and so they could potentially make their own biochar and then put it on their garden plots to amend it, and then not have to buy anything.
And our discussion doesn't have to just focus on that site, so.
In terms of?
Our evening here.
Okay.
Our questions to throw at you.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, if there are other sites that you guys are interested in, we could potentially take soil samples or plant samples from other sites.
Gordy.
Yeah, I know you're focusing on metals, but is there any part of your research that's working on like nicotinoids and PFAS, that kind of chemical?
That's a great question. So there's a lot of interest in PFAS. We're not currently working on it, but it's definitely on our list of things we're interested in and might work on in the future. So our project is nested within a long-term ecological research program that's federally funded, and so the idea is that this program will hopefully continue for decades. And so we kind of have a list of, there's a very good chance we'll expand into PFAS. In terms of neonics, there's at least one person on the project who's interested in pesticides. All the pesticide work we've done so far has been along roadsides. And the good news there is that in all of our screening, we found no neonics. We found a bunch of other pesticides, but we were expecting to find a lot more.
What roadsides were they?
They were scattered across the state.
Oh, that's it.
Yeah. The most worrisome pesticide that we found was chlorpyrifos, which is toxic to humans as well, and the EPA is in the process of banning it. But we found it in like 40% of the milkweeds that we screened.
Other questions?
Do you have other sites in the Como community already or anything, or do you have a big residential site?
So yes and no. Depends on this sort of sub-project. One of the people in my lab works on squirrels, and she studies how squirrel behavior, variation in squirrel behavior affects exposure to pollutants. And one of her main field sites is Como Park. So if you've seen her catching squirrels in the summer, she's in my lab.
What does she look like when she does that?
Well,
Running?
they have traps out. No, they just have traps out and they go, they've got like a behavioral trial box, so they catch the squirrels and the squirrels do a bunch of behavioral tests and then they let them go.
Oh.
And they take a bunch of blood samples and hair samples and stuff like that. We have a number of yard sites. Most of our other sites for butterflies and metals, though, are parks. One of the soil scientists has a bunch of yard sites. We have a lot of sites in East St. Paul because they're really high lead levels, human blood lead levels in East St. Paul. There's some gardens in Frogtown and the Rondo neighborhood, but we don't have that many other sites in Como. Yeah.
How many staff do you have?
In my lab, I have 4 PhD students, 3 postdocs, and about 10 undergrads.
And then you send them forth to?
Yeah, they're all on different projects. So I'd say about half of the people in my lab are currently working on something related to sort of urban pollutants and stuff.
And do you contract out, or do you send them out into the field anywhere in the state to get the samples?
It depends on the project. Right now, most of our samples are local, but in the past, we've had several projects in partnership with MnDOT and the state for roadside sampling that was all over the state. So there's one poor now grad student who spent 2 summers doing field research, and I think her mileage was like she could have driven to Alaska and back a couple times, but she never left the state.
Wow.
It was just driving to all these roadside ditches. But yeah.
Gordy.
Yeah, do you know if anyone is doing any sampling or testing on settling ponds in the golf course and sediment in?
Great question. So I don't know about the golf course, but there's one. There's someone on our grant, Jacques Finley, who does live in Como. I don't know if he's active in this group. He lives over that way, like between the park and the state fairgrounds. But he works on stormwater ponds, and we are just starting some stormwater pond sampling for metals and pollutants, but most of that sampling will be next year and next summer, 2024. But we are currently trying to figure out what sites to have for that, so we could possibly sample in Como. I'll ask him whether he sampled in the park, because he lives right next to it, and I know he does a lot of stuff he's done a lot of stuff with like rain gardens and stuff in the Como neighborhood, the community garden. Oh yeah, yeah, we would be really interested. We have a lot of community garden sites, so we would be interested in that. We also currently, it is relevant to know who owns it though, who owns the community garden, in case we find high levels, but we do currently have a grant that can help people amend the soil if we find high levels in a community garden, but we would have to spend that by July. So we need to get samples soon.
Okay.
Maybe if you're interested in that, you could send me an email and I can look you up with a postdoc who would sample
I think that Orchard Rec site would be owned by the city.
it. Okay.
Of the land, at least.
Is that St. Paul?
Yeah, it's not far actually from the front Jameson site.
Okay.
And not a lot of mileage you have to reimburse for that one.
Yeah, no. We have permission from St. Paul, the city of St. Paul, to sample a lot of parks, so I would bet they would be fine with that. Cool. Any other?
Any other questions? Well, thank you, Emily, very much for
Yeah,
your time
Of
today.
course.
And
Thanks for
making
having
the
me.
connection with us. Now we have your email address,
Yep,
so
yep.
I wanna, keep in touch in any way possible,
Yeah.
both, you to us and we, so.
Yeah. Well,
And now
thank you
you've got a
for-
connection with Jessica, and I'm
Yeah,
sure
exactly.
that'll
thank
be
you for-
helpful.
Thank you for being open to research and on the sites and stuff.
Oh,
So.